Shanxi票号, also known as remittance banks or draft banks, were financial credit institutions that initially specialized in remittance services and later expanded to include deposit and loan services. From the late Qing dynasty to the period before liberation, these institutions served as an old-style financial intermediary between traditional money shops, called qianzhuang, and modern banks. The head office was located in Beijing, with branch offices spread across various provinces and cities. The drafts they issued could be cashed anywhere. Since most of their managers were from Shanxi, they were then called Shanxi票号or Shanxi draft banks. Since the Daoguang era of the Qing dynasty, Shanxi merchants entered their third major phase of development. A defining feature of this period was the emergence of Shanxi票号pioneered by Shanxi merchants. As the draft banking industry grew, Shanxi merchants gradually took the lead in China's financial sector. Moreover, through the integration of commercial and financial capital, Shanxi merchants became a pivotal force in domestic commerce and finance. The social and historical conditions that gave rise to Shanxi票号were truly unique. The origins of Shanxi merchants can be traced back to Wu Shihuo during the Sui and Tang dynasties. Wu Shihuo, the father of Empress Wu Zetian, was a timber merchant who provided substantial financial support to Li Yuan and his son when they launched a rebellion from Taiyuan. Li Yuan's uprising relied on the elite Taiyuan army as well as Wu's financial backing to seize national power. After the founding of the Tang dynasty, Wu was ennobled as a duke with a status equal to that of Qin Qiong and Chen Yaojing. It is easy to imagine the immense wealth Li Yuan received from Wu, who in turn reaped enormous rewards from his astute political investment in Li Yuan. Later, this lineage even produced China's only female emperor, Wu Zetian, though that is another story. The success of Shanxi merchants was rooted in their principles of integrity and a united merchant guild policy. Although Shanxi merchants have been influential from the Ming to the Qing dynasty, it was only with the rise of draft banks that they could truly emerge as the foremost merchant guild of the empire. Before the advent of draft banks, there were already numerous financial service providers such as pawnshops, money shops, and silver houses, many of which were run by Shanxi merchants. Pawnshops offered small loans secured by collateral, while money shops and silver houses primarily dealt in currency exchange. Draft banks, however, specialized in intercity silver remittance, operating on a much larger scale than pawnshops and money shops, though they shared many historical connections. The development of draft banks among Shanxi merchants was also tied to their nationwide commercial network. Draft banks were not entirely new. Ancient China had long used copper coins and silver as legal tender. Compared to gold, silver and copper were metals of lower value per unit weight. For large-scale, long-distance transactions, the inconvenience and high cost of transporting physical currency, coupled with the lack of standardization in silver ingots, which varied widely in weight and purity, led to the use of alternative methods such as feiqian, which directly translates to flying money, and draft notes, which are called huipiao or silver notes. By the late Qing dynasty, Shanxi merchants, after prolonged development, had produced many wealthy merchants with extensive commercial networks spanning the entire country and even overseas. Large-scale trade necessitated substantial financial transactions, creating both demand and natural convenience for long-distance remittance. Thus, Shanxi票号emerged as a natural outcome. Most researchers agree that 日升昌票号, founded by Shanxi pigment merchant Lei Lutai, was China's first draft bank. During the Ming and Qing dynasties, most clothing was made from hand-woven cloth, which required manual dyeing. Though pigments were small in volume, their value was significant. The vast market demand made pigment merchants one of the most prominent groups among Shanxi merchants, particularly those from Pingyao. In Beijing alone, there were 36 Pingyao pigment merchants, with another 36 in Tongzhou. Among them, Xi Yucheng Pigment Shop was the largest, with branches not only in Beijing but also in Tianjin, Shenyang, Sichuan, and elsewhere. Shanxi merchants conducting business outside their home province often needed to transport large sums of silver back to Shanxi. To ensure safety, they hired armed escorts called biaoshi for protection. By the late Jiaqing era, the White Lotus Rebellion and the Tianli Rebellion erupted in the north, compounded by poor harvests and widespread famine, making silver transport extremely risky. Seeking shelter and protection, smaller merchants approached Lei Lutai, asking him, as a fellow native, to help transfer silver from Beijing back to their hometowns. Over time, a fixed practice emerged. Silver would be deposited at Xi Yucheng's Beijing branch, which would then notify the Pingyao headquarters via letter, allowing the silver to be withdrawn in Pingyao. What began as a free favor gradually evolved into a small fee called neitie. When this neitie became a significant source of income for Xi Yucheng, Lei Lutai recognized it as a rare business opportunity. Around the third year of Daoguang, which is 1823, Lei Lutai transformed Xi Yucheng Pigment Shop into Shenchang票号, specializing in remittance services. The draft bank operated under a head office and branch system, with branches established nationwide. Given the concentration of high-ranking officials in Beijing and the commercial prosperity of the South, Shenchang adopted a north deposit, south lending strategy. The bank employed a chief manager, 大掌柜, and an assistant manager, 二掌柜, along with departments for accounting, correspondence, and client acquisition. The accounting department handled bookkeeping and cash flow, the corresponding department managed letters and secretarial work, and the client acquisition team focused on business development. Lei Lutai was actually the chief manager of Shenchang, while the true owner was a man named Li Daquan. However, Shanxi merchants had long practiced a partnership system where professional managers handled daily operations without interference from the owners, akin to the modern separation of ownership and management. Additionally, Shanxi merchants innovated with a profit-sharing system. Capital investors hold silver shares, while contributors hold labor shares, allowing both managers and investors to share in the profits. Some call them the rural ancestors of modern banks because they already embodied the three main functions of modern banking, being deposits, loans, and remittances. As an indigenous financial innovation, draft banks transformed China's traditional monetary circulation. Lei Lutai's contribution was creating an all-Chinese character cipher system. Whether for silver amounts or dates, Chinese characters were used as codes for issuing drafts, a method of utmost precision. For example, quote, "Beware of counterfeit drafts, remember to scrutinize the seal," end quote, represented the 12 months. Or, quote, "How laughable is the fickleness of the world, heaven's way is fairest. Those who scheme for selfish gain and harm others will surely reap what they sow, for good and evil are always repaid in the end quote, represented the 30 days in a month. Similarly, quote, "The Zhao clan's priceless jade has been renowned through the land," end quote, represented the numbers 1 through 10. Finally, quote, "National treasure in circulation," end quote, stood for thousands, hundreds, and taels. Thus, a remittance of 3,000 taels might be encoded as draft, profit, clan, treasure. After Shenchang's success, other Shanxi merchants rushed to emulate it. Next door, Wei Taihou Silk Shop converted into a draft bank under Hou Yingchang, Pingyao's wealthiest man. To compete with Shenchang, Hou poached Mao Honghui, Shenchang's assistant manager, to serve as his chief manager. Mao and Lei always had been at odds, and their rivalry spurred both banks' rapid expansion. Shenchang opened 35 branches in cities like Beijing, Hankou, Guangzhou, Suzhou, and Changsha. Wei Taihou expanded into a chain of 5 banks: Wei Fenghou, Xing Taihou, Wei Shengchang, and Tiancheng, collectively known as the Wei Five. Other notable figures like Chen Pingyuan of Xietengqing Draft Bank, Wu Dade of Baichuantong Draft Bank, and Wang Zhichen of Guangxi Draft Bank also hailed from Rishengchang. To attract talent and incentivize performance, some draft banks even allocated more labor shares than capital shares. For instance, Dade票号had 20 silver shares but 24 labor shares. In 1908, each share earned a dividend of 20,000 taels, an astronomical sum. Following Rishengchang's model, many Shanxi merchants established similar draft banks, creating a national financial remittance network collectively known as Shanxi票号. Emperor Daoguang even bestowed Rishengchang with an inscribed plaque titled Remittance Under Heaven. Unfortunately, that's it for this episode. Tune in next episode to learn more about Remittance Under Heaven and the prime of Shanxi draft banks. Finally, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.